I'd like to continue my discussion of Parse. And in the last example, I just took the default Parse project, which is really bare bones and doesn't have much in it, and I created an app that lets you add a product to the database, and then it displays the product on the screen. So, essentially, it loads this into our database, and then our app reloads the products from the server, and then it displays all this information from the server. Right? Let's try it again. So let's say ball, and this is probably worth, $90, and I'll submit, and then ball shows up on the list. My app still has another feature, right? So if you click on one of the products here, it displays at the top in sort of a detail view. So what I'd like to do now to make this a little more interesting is I'd like to add a system where we can add a comment to any of the products. So if you wanted to comment on the ball, you could write down a comment and submit it to the database. And then when we brought up the ball in the detail view here, it would list all of the comments. Let's talk about how this is going to work. So when I look at Parse here, let me refresh this. And then that way we can see the table with the new item in it, right? So my table has one, or my database here, I should say, has one table in it. And this table has 11 records, okay? In Parse, they call a table a class, and then they call the records a row. Okay, so every row here is one row, and a row contains, an object ID or a value for object ID, a value for name, and a value for price, etc. Right? So, if you want to have another table, like for example comments, we can upload comments to that table, and they can be separate from these, right? And they need to be because, we could add a comment to the ball and maybe put it in the description here, but what if we wanted to have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 100 comments for this product, right? We couldn't store them all here, right? Parse does allow you to put an array of information into a column, but the array is really not that efficient, and if you have a lot of items, it really doesn't work well, right? So the best route here is to create another class. Okay, so think of the classes as holding one type of thing. Okay, so comments are different from products. Like a product has a name and a price, and a comment might have a username and a comment or text value, right? It might have a date, but it doesn't have a price, right? So they're two different things. Okay, so let's we could create our table through JavaScript, but I'm going to do it the reverse method now. And what I want to do is I want to create a new class here in Parse. So I'm logged in, and I'll just click the plus button here, and I'll type in a new class. Let's call it comment with an uppercase C, and this will be a custom class, right? And so I'll click create, and there's my new class. There are no records in it, and it only gets the default columns. So it gets the ACL, the update at, created at, and object ID. Okay? Okay, so how do we add a comment to this? Well, if we wanted to do it in the Parse, website, we'd click the plus row button, and then it would create a new row, and then I could, type in some values here, but actually, there's no values that I really want to fill in because updated at and created at and object ID, these three are all generated by Parse when the record is created. So we don't actually want to set these. We want them set as we create the records. Let's add a new column. Okay, so I'm gonna create a new column here. It'll be a type string because I want to store some text in it, and maybe this will be the name of the person making the comment. We could make it more detailed, right? But we're just going to keep it simple, so it'll just be name. Okay, so now I got a name column. And then maybe I also want to have, a comment column or a text column. Let's call it text like that, right? I don't want to confuse it with the comment here, okay? And this will be type string, okay? And there's my new text column. And this one ended up way over here. I'm going to drag it in so we can see it. Okay, so now I've got this row here that really isn't defined. And then let's put a name in here. I'll put my name in there. It'll be Joe, and my text will be, I like this thing. Okay? And you can see as soon as I added Joe, it actually gave me an object ID and the created at and updated at date. Okay, so what is this object ID? Well, every record in a class or in a table has a unique ID. So the ID is unique to every record, so you can always access exactly that record and be sure that you're getting exactly the same record for the same ID. You won't get two records. You won't confuse one record for another. This is a unique way to identify every record in the table. Now, just because it uses this strange, random set of characters or seemingly random set of characters here doesn't matter. This is a unique identifier, okay? And the same thing happens here in the test object table, right? So the test object table, these guys all have these random kind of sets of characters, but that's the object ID and it's unique. None of them are going to be the same, okay? So how do I, if Joe commented on, I like this thing, well, which thing did he comment on, right? So how do I tie this comment to something in the test object table? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll add another column here, and we're gonna tie them together by the ID. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a column here, and the type this time is gonna be pointer. So pointer is essentially the ID in another table. Okay, so this is gonna be a pointer to the test object table. Okay, so I'll type in column name. It'll be, product. Really, I should have called the test object table product, but we were just starting with the default code, right? And let me find that product column. I'm going to drag it in here. Put it right there, maybe. So I got name, text, and product. And this is a pointer to the test object table. So imagine that Joe was commenting on something in the test object table and he was commenting on, nuts and bolts. So, one way to do this, if we were doing it manually, I'll just copy the ID name here and then paste it into here. And you'll see that, it shows up a little differently, kind of like a button. And what that means is if I click on this, it'll take me to nuts and bolts, right? So, so now these two are tied together, right? So now if I have this ID, I could query this table and pull up all of the records that were, related to nuts and bolts. So, if you had the nuts and bolts object and you wanted to find out, all of the comments for nuts and bolts, you could get its ID here and then query the comment table for all of the comments with the same ID in the product column. Okay? So there we go, right? So let's see now, how can we use that in Parse, right? And what we'll want to do in Parse is in our actual web page is we'll want to add new comments and display comments for each product. Okay? So so let's go back here to the browser there. Let me get the thing. So here's my table here, my web page there, and then I'm going to pull up my HTML document here. Actually, I think I already have it open over here. Okay, and so what we want to do is we want to add a few things here. So right now the product shows up in the detail view in this div. Okay, and so what I need is I need a form where that will allow me to add a comment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a form here, and I'm going to give it an input field. And you could do this a few ways. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to give this an input field that's type hidden. Okay? So a hidden input field can have a value in it that is not visible on the actual page, but it's hidden behind the scenes, right? So we'll make a hidden field here, and then we'll give it an ID. And we'll call this one comment product ID, right? And then I'll make a field that we can see, and this one will be input type, type text. And this will be for the name. So I'm going to give this one an ID also, and I'll call it comment name. And then I'll make a text area this time. And my text area here will be ID comment text. And then maybe the last one here, I'll make input ID comment submit type is submit. Okay, so this will be my comment form. Maybe I'll give the comment form an ID. Call it comment form, right? So this will be my comment form. And here's how we're going to use this. Let me rearrange these windows a little bit, right? So what's going to happen is when, let's actually go back to Parse here, right? So when you fill out the comment form, it's going to have the ID number for the product here, right, in this hidden field. And so the value here in the hidden field is going to go in this column when we create a new record by submitting the form. And the name that you type into this field is going to go into the name field. And the value you type into the comment text is going to go into the text field here, or the text column for the new record. Okay? So imagine, I submit, I was going to create this record here by submitting the form. Then the product ID, the value of this input is going to be this value now over here, right? So imagine that was in this field, and then you went to the comment name and you typed in Joe into that input field, and then you typed in, I like this thing into the comment text, and then you hit the submit button, and then it would create this record, okay? So that's what's going to happen there. Let's see what it looks like right now. So I'll go in here and refresh. So this is my comment form up here, and maybe I'll do a couple things here. Maybe I'll put a paragraph here, and I'll say submit a comment. So we'll have a little message up above that, and then right between these two, maybe let's put a divider, like a line. So I'll just do an HR there, right? I'm just keeping this simple, right? You could style this better, hopefully, right? So here's my form to create new products. Divider, here's my form to add a new comment. Now it's not going to do anything yet here. We're going to have to add that later, okay? But anyway, so now we're all set, okay? So let me save that, and then we'll do another video to complete this, okay?